guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be filming my labour and delivery story. For those of you who haven't watched any of my videos previously, I have a 2.5-year-old daughter named Bailey. She was born on May 23rd, 2016, and whilst her story isn't happy in some senses because it was quite traumatic, it is obviously happy in the sense I got my daughter. I have a happy, healthy child now, and if anything, I want to record this so this is memories for myself, because already in the 2.5 years since I've had her, things have started to escape me, and the details aren't as fresh in my mind as they once were. So I want to film it now while I still have as much memory of everything as possible, and then I have it forever to look back on. Bailey has it to look back on when she gets older, and obviously you guys will have it to watch and hopefully enjoy. So I'm just going to jump right in and get started. So I was 41 plus 4 when I had Bailey. I was 11 days overdue and I was in agony. My whole pregnancy, most of my pregnancy, I'd suffered with quite bad sciatica. So for quite a large portion, mostly from 5 months onwards, Bailey was resting on my sciatic nerve. So I had a lot of back pain, a lot of pressure in my back. And I still get this pressure now, but it almost feels like someone's pushing you from your head and pushing you from your feet and squashing you, and you feel all the pressure in the base of your back around where your pelvis starts. So at first my doctors weren't sure if it was pelvic girdle pain, which is very uncommon to get it in the back of your pelvis, but it is possible, or if it was sciatica. But it turns out it was sciatica. It wasn't constant, but there were days I couldn't even walk. So I was in a lot of pain. I was 41 plus 4. At 41 weeks, I had a stretch and sweep. Was it 41 weeks? I feel like it was earlier. No, I think it was 40. I think it was around 40 weeks. I had stretch and sweep, and it obviously didn't do anything. I get a lot of people that ask me, was it painful and stuff. I wouldn't say stretch and sweeps are painful, they're just very uncomfortable and you feel a lot of pressure. So yeah, I had the stretch and sweep, that didn't do anything. And at the time of my stretch and sweep, my midwife said that she was booking in me in for induction on the following Thursday, in which case I would have been 41 plus 1. So around 41 weeks she was booking me in for induction, which by this point I was like, when I originally felt pregnant and felt my pregnancy, I was like, I don't want to be induced, I want everything to happen naturally, I want to have a water birth, and I want there to be nice music and practice breathing techniques, and Ty will be in the pool with me, and unrealistic expectations. I had anemia in the end, so I wouldn't have been able to have a water birth because I had a high risk of hemorrhage. I think that was the only reason I couldn't have a water birth. Yeah, it was the anemia, but they classed me as a high risk pregnancy because of it. So I wasn't allowed it. I had to be, I could still have midwife led care, but I wasn't allowed to go into the birthing centre. So I came to terms with that and I was fine. But I was adamant I didn't want to be induced. But by this time, by 40 weeks, I was ready to give birth. By 41 weeks, I was like, get her out of me now. I was so uncomfortable. I was really poorly. I had gastroenteritis at 40 weeks, really badly. It was really horrible. And when you're that pregnant, it's hard to do anything. And it was really, I remember it being really hot. Like, I think we were having a heat wave, that kind of hot. So yeah, so the midwife told me on the Thursday, call up, you'll be given a time to go up and be induced. Go up, they'll induce you, Bob's your uncle. So I rang up on Thursday. I'm really sorry. They said, I'm really sorry, we've had lots of emergencies. There aren't any rooms on either Hazel ward, which is the ward which you go to be induced, and after you give birth, it's the pre and postnatal ward. There wasn't any beds on that ward, and there wasn't any beds in labour and delivery. And I suppose they have to preempt, obviously if they're going to bring you in to induce you, they have to make sure there's a bed on the other end to send you to, I'd assume. So I was like, okay, that's fine. They were like, call back tomorrow, it might be a different story. Called back on the Friday, same situation, Saturday, same situation. Called up on the Sunday morning, which was when I was 41 plus 4. It was May 22nd. Called up the hospital. No, sorry, we don't have any beds available currently, but if anything does become available, one of our midwives will contact you back. And I was like, okay. So I just I'd heard this every day, so I just sort of gave up hope that it was going to happen that day. Off we went about our business. We went, I think, into the local town centre. I think. Probably walked the dog. I remember we got a Burger King for lunch. We got a Burger King. At 4 o'clock, I got a phone call from the hospital to say that I could go in at the next shift change at 7 to be induced. Fine, I got off the phone, I had a panic attack. For anyone that doesn't know me, my friends and family will know, I have a crippling fear of hospitals. Absolutely crippling. I hate hospitals. I'd never been admitted to hospital previously to this, but I've had a few bad experiences with family members, and I think it quite closely ties to my emetophobia, which is a fear of vomit. I think it quite closely ties to that, but I have a big fear of hospitals. So obviously I went into panic mode. Was like, oh. My dad and Ty were trying to calm me down, saying just think, like, today or tomorrow you'll have Bailey. We knew she was Bailey. She'll be here, and like next time you come home you're gonna have a baby. So I took myself off for a bath to calm myself down. My back was also really bad this day, so I took myself off for a bath to calm myself down. Get out of the bath, go about business. 7 o'clock, like 10, I think it was about 6:45 we left. 6:45 comes, time to leave the hospital. I threw up everywhere. I just threw up everywhere. I was so petrified, and my anxiety just became so crippling that it did make me physically sick. But nerves, I can imagine, are a common thing. You're going in to do the most painful experience of your life, and everyone's telling you how painful it's going to be, and you have to walk into it willingly. So I can imagine it's not, even if you don't have a fear of hospitals, I imagine the anxiety around having a time and date to go in to be induced it fills me with anxiety. I'm sure it does most people. So anyway, packed up the car with the bags, went off to the hospital, double checked we had the car seat, because me and Ty are two of the most forgetful people in the world, let alone me with baby brain. So made sure we had the car seat, made sure we had everything, got in the car and went to the hospital. We got checked in, put in our room. We had to wait to see our midwife because obviously it was shift change, so they were doing their handover. So I think it was about 7:30 before the midwife came in, but that was fine by me because it gave me a chance to get my bearings and settle down my anxiety, because I found once I was in the room I was okay. My anxiety about being in hospital was gone because I was already there and I was already doing it, so that was fine. About, like I said, about 7:30, I think the midwife came in to introduce herself and let us know that she was going to be our midwife while we were on this ward, and such and such and such. She was going to induce me. This was the procedure. So she went ahead and she gave me a full membrane sweep, which is another word for a stretching sweep, because she did say that she could feel baby's head really pushing on my waters, so she thought my waters would rupture quite quickly. So she gave me a sweep to see if she could help that along. She told me I was already at 1 centimetre dilated, there or thereabouts. My cervix was soft and about 85% effaced, and it was really favourable, and she attached the pessary. So I had a pessary induction. So it's like a piece of ribbon. It looks like a tampon string, and it does hang out of you, the same as a tampon string, but it, like, you can have a bath with it and everything, so it doesn't inhibit you. So she popped that. That was quite uncomfortable because she had to she'd already given me a sweep, so she'd already been in there once. She sort of kept her hand in, this is a bit graphic, sorry, to get the thing, but she had to sort of slide it up her hand and what have you, and it was a bit uncomfortable, and she had to sort of root around to find where to put it on my cervix, which was quite uncomfortable. But I wouldn't say it was painful, not anything compared to the pain I was going to feel later anyway. So she said, And she attached me to the monitor. She put me on the monitor and said you have to be monitored for an hour just to check everything's okay. Did my blood pressure, all the typical observations they would do on mum and baby. So she did those, and then she went away. It was about 8 o'clock by this point. It was quite a lengthy process, and she was sort of in and out. I had to go and fetch the blood pressure machine and the baby monitor and things, so it wasn't all done in one, but that was what happened to induce me. So she left the room, that was about 8 o'clock, and I sort of settled down. I went and got changed into, or was I already changed? I feel like I'd already got changed into my nightie at this point, because I don't remember having to pull my trousers down. Yeah, I'd got changed into my nightie because I'd brought my own clothes where I didn't want to wear a hospital gown. I wanted to sort of keep my labour as clinical-less as possible, if that makes sense. I didn't want to feel like I was in hospital. Silly, I know, but it was what worked for me. So I just sort of settled down. My dad was there as well with Ty. He was my second birthing partner. My dad stayed till about 9 o'clock, and then he made the decision he was going to go home and we should call him when they were moving me around to the labour ward. So that was fine. We watched a movie. I was sick again. This time it was due to heartburn. I had really bad acid reflux throughout most of my pregnancy, and it was just really bad this day, so it made me sick. Ty went downstairs for a cigarette and to meet his friend, because his friend had brought him up some food. And I remember by this time, I think it was about midnight. So we were there quite a while. We watched a movie. I was trying to get some sleep. It was about midnight. And I remember I was getting these like period type pains, but they were getting more painful. So I rang Ty in the end and said, like, can you come back up? I feel like I'm starting to go into labour. Like, I'm getting these pains that my mum told me about. My mum told me that when I went into labour it would feel like really strong period cramps, which is exactly the pain I was feeling. And I just didn't want to go through it on my own. Obviously he was my birthing partner, I wanted him there. I had no issue with him going downstairs in the first place where nothing was happening, but at that point I wanted him to come back. So he came back up, and things get a bit hazy here for me because everything sort of happened very quickly. So this was about midnight. They were getting progressively worse, and at about 1 AM I asked for pain relief, and they said that I could have some paracetamol, and I said I can't take tablets, so unless you can get me anything liquid, that's not going to work for me. And they were like, no, but if you're still bad in like half an hour, we'll come in and give you some Pethidine. And I was like, okay, because I think they sort of presumed that this was just sort of like real mild and it might even go away. So but it didn't. So the midwife came back and she gave me a Pethidine injection, and she gave me an anti-sickness injection. So that was fine. It didn't work. The Pethidine didn't work for me, but I don't know if that's because of the fact that I was in induced labour. Obviously your body is fighting itself because you're being forced to do something it doesn't want to do. So I had the Pethidine, and at 2 o'clock I asked Ty to call my dad. I said, this is getting really bad. My dad, for me, is a person that really centres me. He always knows what to say to make me calm. Ty does as well, but I just wanted them both there. And I had a feeling that this was going to happen quite quickly. I just had a feeling. So I was like, can you ring Dad? I want Dad to come back. So he rang my dad, and my dad came back up, thank God. And during the time it took for Dad to get back up, we live at night about 10 to 15 minutes away from the hospital. In the daytime it can take like 20 to 25 minutes depending on traffic. We lived with my dad at the time. We obviously don't now. We still live the same distance though. So in the meantime, I wasn't meant to go back on the monitor until 4 AM, but the midwife just said she had a feeling that she told us this afterwards, but at the time she just came back in and said, I'm just going to pop you back on the monitor because you seem to be in a lot of pain and it will monitor your contractions. But when she came back after we'd given birth, she actually said she was concerned and she thought something was wrong. So she put me on a monitor. Thank God she did, because it turns out that Bailey's heart rate was dipping with every contraction but wasn't coming back up. So her heart rate was steadily getting lower and lower and lower. So and by this point my contractions were a minute apart, lasting about 40 seconds. So I was getting about 20 seconds relief. Yeah, that's not even a joke. And I was only 2 centimetres dilated. Yeah. So my dad got up and they called it was either a senior midwife or it was a doctor. I don't remember which. They called them into the room and they asked them to like check Bailey's heart rate and check like the contractions and everything. And they told me to get on my left hand side to see if that would improve Bailey's heart rate, because sometimes if you're led on your back or your right hand side, it can affect the way the monitor picks up the heart rate or something. So had me move onto my left hand side, reluctantly from myself, because whenever I would lay on my left hand side with heartburn it would make me sick. So, but they were like, I'm sorry, you have to, like, we have to be able to. I was like, no, that's fine, I'll just do it. I just sort of propped myself up a little bit to sort of stop me being led. So, and I was in excruciating pain. Ty's referral to this part of labour was that I sounded like a cow on a farm, because apparently I was mooing. Apparently very much like Nessa in Gavin and Stacey. So, but I was in a lot of pain and that was what was helping me. So, in the end, laying on my left hand side didn't help. So they were like, we're going to have to take you around to labour and delivery, get you some stronger pain relief, and there's doctors around there that can help you. They can get to you quicker than because the doctors would have to come from labour and delivery to the ward. So it was just easier if I was on labour and delivery. So they wheeled me round to labour and delivery. Ty and Dad sort of waddled behind with all the bags. We got put in a room with 2 midwives to start with, and they gave me gas and air. And was sort of like getting ready to examine me, check where I was. And in the time it took them to wheel, in less than an hour, I went from a 2 to a 4. So things were happening really quick. So I had gas and air, I took 2 puffs of it and I said, I'm gonna be sick. And the lady was like, oh, honey, I promise you you're not. This is just the feeling gas and air gives you. And I said, no, I can feel it coming. I'm going to be sick. And apparently, I don't actually remember it, but apparently they didn't get the bowl to me in time and I was sick all up Ty's arm. Sorry, babe. So the gas and air wasn't helping. So they ruptured my waters to see if that would speed things along. And a doctor came in. They put a cannula in this wrist. I still have a scar from it. So they put a cannula in my wrist. I don't know why they didn't do it in the back of my hand, but they did it in my wrist anyway. They put a cannula in and the doctor came in. And at this point there was talks of me having a C-section. And they were sort of saying, there was a midwife stood next to me and the doctor had me in the stirrups. So the midwife who stood next to me and she was saying, right, so if we're going to take you around, if the doctor decides you need to have a C-section, what's going to happen is we'll take you away, get you your spinal block, which will take away all your pain. And in the meantime, Ty will be getting prepared into sterile clothing to come in and join you in theatre. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I don't care. Just do what you have to do. I want Ty to be there. And the nurse, the doctor at this point said, I need to take a blood sample from the top of your baby's head to determine how quickly we need to get her out, whether we can sort of give you a drip to speed your labour up even further, or whether we can give you, or whether we need to give you a C-section. So she, I'm going to get a bit graphic. She went fully up Ty says she was about this deep in me, so nearly elbow, because Bailey was still really high. She wasn't descending very well, I think was the term they used. And she cut the top of her head and she took a blood sample. And it got sent away to be tested. And I presume this is a very quick test. It must be something they can do on the ward. Meanwhile, we're all just sort of, I don't really remember what else was happening. And then the doctor came back in and said, we need to take you to theatre now. We're going to put you under a general anaesthetic and we're going to get her out. Those exact words. And she pulled the emergency buzzer behind my head, and about 6 to 10 people came running into my room. And there were people hooking me up to things and taking me away from things and doing all sorts. What was happening? We just could tell that it was serious and that something bad was happening. So they wheeled me into theatre, which luckily was the next room across from mine, because in our hospital, the maternity units have their own theatres. I don't know if that is the same for every hospital, in the UK at least. But my hospital has, the labour and delivery ward has its own theatre. So it was the next room across from mine, so it wasn't like they had to take me far. And they took me in and they asked me to climb over onto what can only be described as a bench. It's like this wide, with an area for your arm, the arm with the IV in, to go out obviously to so your IVs don't get tangled up and everything. And there was loads of people in the room in all surgical gear. Now I watch a lot of Grey's Anatomy, okay? I'm a Grey's Anatomy fanatic. So I knew that people obviously were in sterile clothing, and like I could sort of picture what it should look like, and it was about spot on. There were people, there was nurses, doctors, midwives. There was a team of people behind me that now I know were the NICU team. It's SCBU in our hospital, the special care baby unit. It's not NICU in our hospital. They were behind me, obviously preparing for if there was anything wrong with Bailey. And then it's two anesthesiologists, I can never say this word, anesthesiologists, that's the one, anesthesiologists were behind me. And he asked me when the last time I ate was, and I said it was 4 o'clock, but I've been sick twice. And he was like, yeah, no, that's fine. Because obviously I presume if they're rushing in for you emergency, obviously you haven't had time to fast. They must have to be able to watch out for vomit and stuff. And there was an anesthesiologist next to me putting stuff into my IV. And the one above my head said, this is going to hurt. We're going to squeeze on your throat. And at the same time they were putting a catheter in at the other end, so as I'm falling asleep I could feel a tube going into my mouth and a catheter going in the other way. But I was so out of it, it wasn't painful, I just knew it was happening, and that was it, I was asleep. So obviously from this point is sort of family's recollection of events and what happened. Obviously I was asleep, so a midwife went back in to let Ty and Dad know that they'd put me under and that she'd be back when the baby was born. Went back in the room. It took them 12 minutes. I was put under general anaesthetic. I was taken into the theatre at 4 AM and she was born at 4:12. So it was quick. And my scar shows that because it's not even. So they pretty much ripped me open, which, fine. Do what you've got to do. So Bailey was born weighing £7 14 ounces at 4:12 AM, and I'll get into what happened to her in a minute. But they went back out and they told my dad and Ty that she was born, that she was having some difficulties. They didn't give them any more details than that. So my dad rang Ty's mum because Ty was an absolute mess and Ty couldn't talk to her, just to let her know, because Ty's family live in Essex, so none of them could be there. He then proceeded to ring my sister and my mum, who both came straight to the hospital. So when Bailey was born, she was born without a heartbeat. She was born, they call it unresponsive, but essentially she was born dead. It took them, the special care team, 7 minutes to resuscitate her. They had to put a breathing tube in her, they had to intubate her. And yeah, she went 7 minutes without oxygen. So they were obviously concerned, as were we when we found out. And they took her away. We never got to see her. They took her away to special care. So that was fine. They finished up my surgery, took me into recovery, back into my room that I was in with my family, and woke me up. And I remember waking up and seeing my sister and seeing my mum and sort of scanning the room for a baby. Like, right, well, Ty hasn't got her. No one else has got her. The cot's empty. Where's my child? And straight away, and I can't fault this enough because it was quick, straight away the doctor from the special care team came in, and he basically filled us in on the fact that Bailey had been born unresponsive, without a heartbeat, one without oxygen for 7 minutes. They'd had to intubate her. But I was so in and out of it. I just remember saying, when can I see her? And he was like, we need some time to perform some tests and things, and you need to get a bit better first, because I wasn't exactly well either. I'd just come around from general anaesthetic. So they went again, and we were sort of just left like, oh God, what's happening? But I had everyone I needed in the room. My dad, Ty and my sister went down to buy some breakfast, and the midwives gave me a bed bath and got me changed. And my mum stayed with me for that. And then at about 10 a.m, 9 or 10 a.m, so Bailey was 5 or 6 hours old, we were told we could go down and see her, just me and Ty. So they actually wheeled me down in the bed because I wasn't ready to have my catheter removed yet. They had to give me more time. So we were wheeled down and we saw her, and she'd extubated herself. She extubated herself, which is removed her breathing tube. At 3 hours old, she pulled it out. She's her daddy's daughter, she's strong-willed. But they had put her in a medically induced coma, and they'd cooled her temperature with morphine because she was having an EEG. So that's a brainwave test basically. She had either 6 or 12, I don't remember which, needles going into her head, into her brain, to test the neurofunction and whether she was essentially brain dead. She passed it all with flying colours. I was discharged the next day on the Tuesday. Bailey was born on Monday. I was discharged on the Tuesday, and Bailey was discharged on the Thursday. So she has no known deficits, but there is still time for us to discover them. Obviously she could have a number of things that we would discover at school age, learning disability wise, but so far she is absolutely amazing, perfectly healthy. We have no issues. And yeah, so why it might not have been the happiest of births and the birth I had planned for myself, it is what happened, and we are so blessed to have her. And we just know going forward, if we were ever to decide to have more children, I would have an elective cesarean so that we didn't have to go through this again. And honestly, C-sections aren't as bad as people say. I was fully back to normal in 2 weeks. Obviously there was things I wasn't allowed to do, like you're not allowed to lift anything heavier than your baby. So you're not allowed to exercise, you're not allowed to push a hoover, you're not allowed to push the buggy, things like that. But I felt myself after 2 weeks. After about a week, I was on painkillers for 4 days, but only paracetamol and ibuprofen because that's all I got discharged from the hospital with. So I was on painkillers for 4 days, and then by week 2 I was fully mobile. Like, I was walking myself fine and everything. I feel personally, and I know a fair few people that have had natural labours, I feel like C-section recovery is easier. I do. Because it doesn't affect your toilet habits. It isn't it's painful to start with, but it's not excruciating. Whereas if you have stitches or an episiotomy, they can take weeks to heal, and I honestly felt better after 2 weeks. I was fully healed at 6 weeks, and back to normal, like back to doing everything at 6 weeks. So yeah, that was my labour and delivery story. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment and subscribe, and we will see you in our next video. Bye guys.